What is happening here has come about because of a belief that this would come about. And that, I think, is very much the essence of what we're doing.
But what was the dream? I mean, was it a dream of sculptures or the company?
It continues. It's at the moment a group of about 10 people comprising various different skills, and we've amalgamated, homogenized, and become really one unit which is capable of turning out the sort of things that you've been looking at or may look at.
The Mutoids have a thing about performing, as you may have noticed. But as well as being part street theatre, they're part art show and part travelling circus. But above all else, for all the members, the company has become a rather weird way of life.
I'm not accepting the fact that people should go out to work and do the things they should normally do in society. There are other things to do. They can travel around, they can live in these vans. You don't have to live in a house, you don't have to buy one. You can do whatever you want, which is what I think they're doing. They're creating things in their hands become art. They become not objects or things to use. They are now making things into artworks as well. A car can become a piece of work plus a car. It's still a car, but it becomes also a piece of art. It becomes a movable piece of art, and a piece of art you can actually live in.
The vehicles, yes, we're starting now to mutate heavily our own vehicles. There are a couple that you may have seen. There's an old coach, an old Bedford coach that actually burned out and had a skull built onto the front of it. You drive through one of the eye sockets of the skull. That's mutated, that's a piece on its own, but I don't see why the lines of any of these vehicles in here shouldn't, as I was saying, incorporate any aesthetic properties they hold. We can exaggerate them, we can mutate them, and thereby make the thing visually much more potent than ever it was when it left the factory that it left.
Being mobile and travelling, usually from one bit of decaying London to another, is crucial to the whole way of life. The Mutoids move around in and live in a convoy of battered but stylish coaches, caravans, lorries, even a horse box. Everywhere they go, they scavenge what other people throw away and use it in their art. And they don't just squat in these derelict places, they use them as backdrops for impromptu art shows, performances and parties, which up to 1,000 people attend. The lifestyle is basically a nighttime one. This bunch, as you can see, are fond of a lie-in. You rarely see a Mutoid before noon. In this Mad Max-style atmosphere, and nobody's better prepared for the apocalypse than this lot, it's a strange life, close to the edge.
Close to the edge. To the edge.
But it was time to meet the major inspiration and driving force behind the Mutoids, the mad preacher himself, 25-year-old Joe Rush. A grammar school boy from the home counties, Joe was once a punk, but his life really started to change when he channeled his anarchic energies into the building of a motorbike.
What I first did was I started getting very involved in motorbikes, and I used to just, I used to wear all the badges, and my bedroom was just full of motorbikes and drip trays and wheels and stuff. And then the mutation happened, and I was one day building a trials bike, and next day I was building this, figure on the bike, out of motorcycle parts, and then the bike and the figure metamorphosised into this centaur, you know, and the two became as one. And that was the first of the mutations.
At first, Joe was content to mutate objects, and as artworks they were much in demand. But then a fierce desire took hold of Joe. He wanted to get to grips with himself.
First mutation I did to myself was, I shaved my head at midnight on Midsummer's night, because I don't know why, I was in the bath and I had some scissors, so I shaved my head. And then I found that I couldn't go out my flat, I was too self-conscious. And I made it down to the phone box and back, but, you know, I was like a hermit crab out of its shell. So I got this old rabbit skin and glued it on my head, as a Mohican, you know, stuck it on with a bit of carpet tape. And went out and I felt great. And then I noticed that everybody else thought it was they were either shocked by it or they thought it was funny, but whatever I was doing, I was getting a reaction, you know what I mean? Which made everything much more interesting, you know, because though I was making a fool of myself, you know, I don't greatly mind that anyway. It was, you could go and buy a packet of fags and you'd have sort of 3 or 4 incidents, you know, to think back on just through buying a packet of fags. So that's the essence of mutation, really.
Yeah.
But to mutate properly, you've got to stop taking yourself seriously, you know.
New wave British comics, which reflect a vision of life after the apocalypse, have made a big impression on Joe's imagination.
Joe has been influenced by comics. I think he liked very much Judge Dredd and 2000 AD, the visual appearance and the things that they dealt with in there. There's a general air of violence and decay. But I think Joe has taken the ethic of all that to its extreme. You know, let's change everything. And Joe's done this. Joe doesn't live like anybody else anymore. Joe lives in a state of total anarchy towards everybody else now.
Joe's weird view of the world was soon transmitted to others. For 10 years, Robin was a very bored Morris Minor mechanic. Since bumping into Joe, his life has changed, or mutated, very dramatically.
And all these people are drawn together by one idea, you say?
Yes, by Joe, really, who is the spearhead, the inspiration, the wild imagination behind it. I know he inspired me, for instance, to, having worked on standard, normal car engines for years, it was becoming very boring, and my task was to make sure that the engine would run for 80,000 miles without packing up and be reliable, and I'd done it enough times to be bored with it. I then was inspired by Joe to mutate myself into an engine. This is the front half, the dashboard. I can turn myself on. I built this engine to look as if it worked. Perhaps only a mechanic would know that there was absolutely no chance of it ever working at all. But this was my mutation. I became an engine.
Mind you, there are other mutations going on which are considerably more mystical. After 4 years of living in a wood in Shropshire, Richie has become the company's resident alchemist and is often to be found muttering over an open fire.
Dispersion of the elemental forces of the water transmute together to forge these base elements and base metals into something that will become gold. Hum, pat, hum, pat, hum, pat. Earth, water, fire.
Nirvana in a parcels depot. That's what Rich is seeking.
Assisted by the element of air, the elements of wood, the elements of stone, and the elements of... I've got smoky eyes.
No,
Right.
do you mind me asking what you're actually doing here?
What am I actually doing here? I'm conducting an age-old ceremony of the transmutation of elemental forces.
From what into what?
From base materials, I shall produce
Gold.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the depot, my beloved old motor was getting the treatment that I suppose had always been on the cards.